Hi guys! Today we're going to talk about using drones for filming in Japan. In recent years, drones have become a somewhat contentious topic in Japan, and you might have heard about people actually getting arrested because they flew drones where they weren't allowed to. However, it is absolutely possible to use drones for filming here in Japan. Japan does have a lot of rules and restrictions and regulations about the use of drones, not only for filming, but also for filming. So today we're going to look at some of these rules. In Japan, rules differ greatly for drones that weigh less than 200 grams and drones that weigh 200 grams or more. When you're filming and use a drone, that's going to be larger drones. So today I'm just going to talk about the rules that apply to drones that weigh 200 grams or more. Let's get right into some important information. Who can actually fly drones in Japan? Japan does not have like a driver's license for drone operators. So in principle, anyone can fly a drone here. That being said, there are quite extensive rules and restrictions about where you can shoot using a drone or where you can fly a drone at all. The Japanese government has divided the country into 3 different kinds of zones. There are no-fly zones where you are not allowed to fly at all. Permit-only zones, these would be areas where you're usually not allowed to fly a drone, but you can get a permit from the Regional Aviation Bureau or from the local airport, depending on the rules about that certain area. When you apply for such a permit, you need to show that the operator has experience in flying that specific drone under different circumstances and different environments. So it's not for someone who has never flown a drone ever before. It is for professionals who know what they're doing. The third type of zone is a free fly zone, let's call it that. You don't need an official permit for them. You don't need a drone use permit, if you want to call it that. But that doesn't mean that you don't need other types of permits, for example, a road use permit if you want to start and land on a public street. It also doesn't mean that you don't need the permission from property owners if you want to fly over their property. The actual divisions of these 3 zones and the rules that govern them are kind of complicated, so I'm going to make a separate video just about that. It is really important to know which kind of zone your location is, because if you don't know that, you don't know if you need a permit or if you can just go ahead or if you're allowed to fly a drone there at all. So check that out once it's up. And right now we're going to go to the 10 general rules or etiquette when you fly drones in Japan. Number 1, do not fly a drone under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Number 2, always do your proper pre-flight checks before you fly a drone. Number 3, fly a drone in a way that it cannot collide with manned or unmanned aircraft. Number 4, do not operate your drone in a careless or reckless manner. So that's basically about not endangering other people with the way you fly your drone. Number 5, fly your drone only in the daytime. Daytime here means from sunrise to sundown. Number 6, your drone operator needs to maintain the visual line of sight with the drone at all times. Number 7, keep at least a 30-meter distance between your drone and people or buildings. So that does not mean that you cannot fly low over your own cast and crew or above buildings that you have permission to film at, but it means basically third parties, any people, vehicles, or buildings that have nothing to do with your shoot. You're not allowed to fly closer than 30 meters above them. Number 8, do not operate drones above event spaces where large crowds gather. So that's usually for outdoor festivals, events, stuff like that. Number 9, do not transport any hazardous materials, explosives for example, with the drone. And number 10, do not drop anything from the drone. So all these rules make total sense if you want to keep people safe around drones, but some of them impact especially film shoots immensely. So what happens is that the rules 1 to 4 are non-negotiable. You cannot get out of them, you just have to follow them. But for rules 5 to 10, you can get an exemption. So how do you get that exemption? If you remember earlier, I talked about getting a drone use permit from the Aviation Bureau. And this is actually the same application form where you can ask them to give you an exemption from any of these rules. Let's say you have a night shoot or you want to film on top of a larger crowd. You can fill all that in. Obviously, you have to tell them exactly why you want to do it and how you're going to do it, but you can get an exemption with that. When we talk about rules, we also have to talk about penalties. If you violate any of these rules, meaning if you violate rules 1 through 4, or if your shoot basically violates any of the rules 5 through 10 and you have not got an exemption from them, you're doing something illegal and you are liable for a fine of up to 500,000 Japanese yen. Also, your drone operator may actually face jail time of up to a year if they fly a drone under the influence. So make sure everything is all right in that regard. Getting a drone use permit can be a little bit tricky, so I'm gonna make a different video about the application procedure. A drone use permit can be applied for a certain shoot, in which case you can have a time limit of about 3 months. But especially for professional drone operators, that is a lot of hassle because they're using drones every other day to film, right? So what happens with these kind of guys who use drones very often is that they can get a basically long-term permit that is valid for up to a year. A drone use permit is actually a quite lengthy procedure. After you file the application, officially it takes 10 work days before you get your permit. But I've talked to drone operators here in Japan and they said usually these aviation bureaus that give out the permits are pretty busy. So you're looking at a month, realistically, ahead of your shoot that you have to file everything so you can get your permit on time. That is one other reason why it's really good to work with a professional drone operator here in Japan, because they all have long-term permits, so you don't need to go every time you want to film somewhere and get one of these drone use permits. One positive thing here, drone use permits are free of charge, so at least you don't pay a lot for them. In the end, the final decision of whether or not you're allowed to film with a drone lies with the location that you want to use. So even if you do all the paperwork, you do everything right, you get all the permits, if the location isn't okay with you flying a drone there, you're not going to be able to fly one. So check with the location very early on before you start this whole process if they're okay with you flying a drone, and also what possibly additional application procedures apply. Sometimes even in places where you don't even need a drone use permit, the location might want you to get one, because for them it's, I guess, a bit of a security thing, and it also tells them that you are using a drone operator that knows what they're doing. Just check that out well ahead of time with your location. Last but not least, I have been asked before if a drone operator needs a radio license in Japan, because obviously drones use radio frequencies. And sometimes you also have these first-person view control units that use radio as well. In Japan, drones are controlled on the 2.4 gigahertz band. So if you have a drone that works on that bandwidth, you're going to be fine. Usually drones that are sold in Japan, they are fine on that bandwidth. You should check if you want to use a drone that was bought anywhere else, because sometimes they use different bandwidths. I've seen that some of the first-person view control units, they use 5.8 gigahertz, I think. So in that case, that is not a free-to-use bandwidth, and you need someone with a amateur radio license to be on set to be allowed to use that. And that's it for now. Check out the other videos about the no-fly, permit-only and free-fly zones in Japan, and about what the whole application process for getting a drone use permit is like. Stay safe. Bye.